chapter 19. Give thanks and praise to God, our Father, His Son, Jesus Christ, in whom we have the forgiveness of sins and share in the adoption of sons, and to the power, presence, and preeminence of the Parakletos, the Holy Spirit, who comes alongside us and teaches us all things and is our comforter, keeper, and guide. We honor the presence of the divine Trinity, and to all of you, the saints of God, greetings to you in Jesus' name. Reading from the New Revised Standard Version, Luke chapter 19, verses 1 through 10. Hear now the words of the sacred writ. He entered Jericho and was passing through it. A man was there named Zacchaeus. He was the chief tax collector and was rich. He was trying to see who Jesus was, but on account of the crowd, he could not, because he was short in stature. So he ran ahead and climbed a sycamore tree to see him, because he was going to pass that way. When Jesus came to the place, he looked up and said to him, Zacchaeus, hurry and come down, for I must stay at your house today. So he hurried down and was happy to welcome him. All who saw it began to grumble and said, he has gone to be the guest of one who is a sinner. Zacchaeus stood there and said to the Lord, look, half of my possessions, Lord, I will give to the poor. And if I have defrauded anyone of anything, I will pay back 4 times as much. Then Jesus said to him, today salvation has come to this house, because he too is a son of Abraham. For the Son of Man came to seek out and to save the lost. The word of God for the people of God. Thanks be to God. Again, I want to lift as a subject for our consideration: privilege, power, and possessions. Privilege, power, and possessions. Famous ethicist and professor and leading Howard Thurman scholar, Dr. Walter Earl Fluker, has posited this transformative thought: that leaders must be awake at the intersection where worlds collide. My fear this day, at this moment, is that there are too many of us who are asleep behind the wheel at the intersection of a potential revolution. What in the world are you talking about, Pastor Vickers? The world in which we live is in quite a precarious position. If we, at this moment, do not make up our minds to be alert, active, and engaged, everything we know about the world will come crumbling down. And I can hear the pessimism in some of our internal voices that the world in which we live should crumble. There's so much wrong with it, so much moral decay, so much ethical relativism, that the world in which we live is in need of an extreme makeover. And you are true. Your thoughts are true. You are right in how you have judged. However, there is more at stake than what we realize. And if we refuse to wake up, our lives will be in total shambles. Allow me to come at it from a different angle. If we refuse to wake up, all of the progress that has been made over the last 70 years, all of the progress that has been won because of fire hoses that were turned on us and K-9 units that were resisted, all of the progress that we made in an effort to fight and vote for equality and equity will be completely taken away. I would encourage us this morning, if you do nothing else, before you go to sleep on this sermon, wake up. In fact, I'm not a big turn to your neighbor person, but would you just elbow the person beside you and tell them, Pastor says, wake up. Pastor says, wake up. Before your eyelids get too heavy, wake up, wake up. Wake up, because we are on the verge of a revolution. You better wake up. If you don't wake up, you'll never have to vote again. You better wake up. If you don't wake up, then all of the school curriculum will be completely changed and we will be written out. You better wake up. You better wake up, because if you don't, the entire Department of Education will go away. If you don't wake up, the entire Department of Justice will go away, because the world and society in which we live is set up to be all about privilege, power, and possessions. And can I tell you, brothers and sisters, you and I are on the wrong side of the societal construct. You better wake up. You better wake up, because this is not some distant reality. This has come alive not only on the national stage, but this has life right here in our very own community. It ought not by this time be lost upon us, brothers and sisters, that there is an interest in the Redan community. We have come to discover that not only is there an interest in the land right here at Redan and Young Road, but there is an interest all over this area where large corporations are hiding behind masks and facades of black businesses in order to come in and take over this area and tell us what to do and if we can live here. I'm just trying to tell you, you better wake up. And if that is still too distant for you, I want you to know that has touched our very own congregation. There's a family in our congregation who for years has been fighting against big banks and corporations that is literally in effort trying to take away the land upon which they have lived for decades. I'm trying to tell you, you better wake up. Because the world in which we live is all about privilege, power, and possessions. Privilege, the ability to do what you want to do because things are set up for your advantage. Power, the ability to act authoritatively because you have been vested with authority and control. And possessions, the fruit and trophies of what privilege and power allow you to amass. I'm trying to tell you that the world in which we live is set up for the privileged to have power and accrue possessions. And Dr. Vickers, what in the world does this have to do with Jesus? Because I thought that there was a such thing as separation of church and state. And what does this have to do with Jesus? Because Jesus is concerned about my personal salvation. Jesus is concerned about my relationship with God. But might I suggest to you, brothers and sisters, that the theology of personal salvation alone is a construct of white privilege and power that has caused an accruance of possessions. I'm preaching better than you're letting on. The Bible shows us, and the gospel illustrates to us that while, yes, Jesus is concerned about our salvation. While Jesus, yes, is concerned about our individual relationship with God. Yes, while Jesus is concerned about that, Jesus is also concerned about structural sin that keeps people out of relationship with God and away from having access to the abundant life that God has called all of us to live as children of God. And a church that only cares about individual salvation is a church that is asleep at the intersection where worlds collide. You better wake up. You better wake up and see that God cares about the world in which we live. You better wake up and see that God cares about how we treat one another and how we love one another and how we participate in systems that are designed to keep folk out and down. We are living in a world of whiteness. Uh-oh. And allow me to say it this way. When I say whiteness, I am not simply talking about Euro people. I'm talking about a system and construct that makes you think that their ice is colder and their water is cleaner. I'm talking about a system and construct that makes you think that you are inherently less than because your skin has been kissed by the sun. And if you think that that only permeates in the economic participation and in the political sphere, I've come to let you know that whiteness has also infiltrated the church. It makes you think that Jesus was blue-eyed and blonde-haired. It makes you think that all you have to do is come to church and make a personal confession and profession. It makes you think that we better not talk about certain things from the pulpit, because if we do, we will lose our 501c3 status. But can I tell you that I'm too awake to allow this church to be confined to the fetters and evil and sinister ways of whiteness. I am too awake to allow us to only be concerned about our individual selves. That's against who we are as a people. One of the worst things to happen was for us to get a little bit of money and be able to live where we want to live. I used to sit at the feet of my grandmama and listen to the way life used to be. And unfortunately, like Paul, I was born out of time. I was not around and alive to see things like this happen. But my grandmama talks about a time when community was all that we had. And we didn't always have money. We couldn't always go to Publix where shopping is a pleasure. But you would have to go and knock on your neighbor's door. And you would say, if I give you a cup of sugar, would you let me borrow a cup of eggs? We had community. And somewhere along the line, we've lost community because we have become indoctrinated with privilege, with power, and with possessions. We've got to get back to who we are. Nothing wrong with who we are. We are a people of great resistance and great resolve. We are a we shall overcome kind of people. We are people who know what it means to hold on through adversity, to hold on to God's unchanging hand. This is the kind of socioeconomic and political climate in which we find ourselves in Luke chapter 19. We are coming to the close of Jesus' ministry, and scholars tell us that this would begin to initiate the Passion Week of Jesus. Jesus has made, according to Luke, Acts, that long journey toward Jerusalem, and he is finally at at the last leg of his journey. The Bible tells us that he has now entered Jericho. He has entered Jericho, which at this time was known to be a tax capital of the Roman Empire. Jesus enters Jericho, and by this time in Luke 19, we are clear about Jesus's life and mission. Jesus' life and mission is not what everybody thought it would be. Some thought that Jesus as the Messiah would be the one to enact a political coup d'etat, that he would overthrow the emperor of Rome, and that he would restore the throne and fortunes of Israel from Jerusalem by sitting upon the throne where his ancestor David used to sit. But that is not what Jesus came to do. In fact, some of his zealot followers were hoping for that, but that is not what Jesus came to do. Some thought that Jesus would cause a religious revolution, that he would be seated as the great high priest on earth, and that he would restore the kind of religious faith that the kingdom and people of Israel were supposed to have. But that is not Jesus's mission and life work here on earth. In fact, if we were to read to the end of this particular pericope around verse 10, we are reminded of Jesus's purpose and ministry. His purpose and ministry was to seek and to save those that are lost. To seek and to save those that are lost. And I want to give you a spoiler alert early in this message, because some of us get upset at the reality that Jesus comes to seek and save those that are lost. Yes, I'm talking about us, even those of us who are in the church. We get upset because when we look at folks and we judge folks and we determine where they should spend eternity and how they should get there, we get upset when we see somebody's life be turned around. Isn't that strange that folks who know about the grace, love, mercy, power, and forgiveness of God are the same folk who get mad when God reaches down in love and mercy and power and forgiveness to restore somebody? This is Jesus's ministry in a nutshell. It is the walking thesis of his life, to seek and save those that are lost. And it is here in Luke chapter 19 that we are introduced to a brother who is lost. He is indicative of one who represents the worst of the worst that society has to offer. He's a brother by the name of Zacchaeus. In Hebrew, Zacchaeus, which means righteous or innocent one. And yet, as we are introduced to the character and personality of Zacchaeus, we discover that there is nothing righteous or innocent about him. And yet, his name is Zacchaeus. Is it not interesting to you, brothers and sisters, that we are called by God not who we are, but who he wants us to be, long before we live up to the name that we are called? In fact, I've come to let you know this morning that everybody in here has a new name. Your name is Zacchaeus. And although I know what you did last night and where you rolled out of bed this morning, although I may not know the words that you said yesterday, those 4 and 5 letter words that you pieced together like nobody's business, your name is Zacchaeus, because long before you are righteous and innocent, God in his providential wisdom calls you what you are before you give indication that you are who he created you to be. Can I say it this way? Long before you're forgiven, God named you forgiven. Long before you were saved, God called you saved. Long before you redeemed, God called you redeemed. God calls you what you are long before you become what he calls you. So his name is Zacchaeus, meaning righteous or innocent one, but there's nothing righteous or innocent about Zacchaeus, because Luke tells us that he is the chief tax collector. that his job is to oversee not only the collection of taxes, but all of the tax collectors who collect the taxes. In fact, Zacchaeus' job was to amass all of the money that was collected through the taxes, but then he would also give himself a cut of the taxes that were collected. And as a result of giving himself his own kickback, Zacchaeus amassed a great amount of wealth. Allow me to say it this way: paying taxes was a difficult thing to do for the normal person of the ancient Near East. It hurt to pay the government because the government was already greedy. And so you have a bunch of poor people trying to stay out of legal trouble by often paying what they don't have just so the government could leave them alone. In fact, the government itself was the government's biggest criminal. But because you can't arrest yourself, you can get locked up in Fulton County in Rome and still get out with a presidential motorcade because you can't arrest yourself. And on top of that, Zacchaeus would pay himself. He was rich, y'all. I know you think you've seen money. I know you've driven down Tuxedo Row, but that ain't no real money. Zacchaeus had real money. Zacchaeus could go every 2 years to the dealership and drive brand new off the lot. Zacchaeus had real money, y'all. Zacchaeus had enough money to buy a golf course in Florida and make it his primary residence. Zacchaeus had some real money, y'all. Zacchaeus could build Zacchaeus towers all over the world. He could sponsor athletic events in Las Vegas and New York. Zacchaeus had real money. But let me tell you what really made Zacchaeus an enemy. It was not just the fact that he cheated poor people out of their money. And it was not just the fact that as a result, he amassed all of these possessions and opulent wealth. It was the fact that Zacchaeus himself was also an Israelite. Y'all not hearing me? What I'm trying to say in my own saved, sanctified way is that all skin folk ain't your kinfolk. You got people who look like you and who grew up on the same side of the tracks that you grew up on. But what governs their life is a completely different set of morals and ethics. Makes you look at them and say, how can you think like that? And how can you move like that? And how can you treat people like that? And how can you vote like that? Or how can you not vote at all? You better wake up. And so Zacchaeus was the epitome of a traitor because he hurt his own people in protection of self. Zacchaeus was concerned about his own privilege, his own power, and his own possessions. But there's something very interesting that Luke leads us to in Luke chapter 19. As we are introduced to Zacchaeus, knowing that his name means righteous or innocent one, and then at the same time dealt the ironic twist that there's nothing righteous or innocent about him, we also see that in the midst of all of his privilege, in the midst of all of his power, and although he has amassed all of these possessions, there is something that Zacchaeus is lacking. Out of all that he has gained, out of all that he has amassed, there's something that Zacchaeus is still looking for. He went to Nordstrom's but couldn't find it. Went to Tesla but couldn't find it. Went to Buckhead, couldn't find it in Phipps or in Linux. He's in search of something, but he can't find it because his soul is restless. And let me suggest this to you. There's nothing wrong with having a little money. There's nothing wrong with being able to drive where you want to drive. There's nothing wrong with being able to eat where you want to eat and what you want to eat. Right now, I could go for a Hawaiian from Houston's, medium well, no steak sauce is needed, with some of those whipped mashed potatoes, that little green stuff on the top. There's nothing wrong with having material things. But when it becomes your Lord, and when you set out to accrue and amass at the expense of others, God has something to say about those of us who participate in a system that is designed to hurt people and keep them down. We got to wake up. Let me say it this way. If your politics inform your faith, instead of your faith informing your politics, be very careful about how you keep living day to day, because there will come a time that, like Lazarus, you will have to lift up your eyes. Zacchaeus is in search of something. Doesn't quite know what it is, but there comes a point in time when what you have won't satisfy you. When you develop a thirst and a longing for God, the kind of car you drive doesn't matter as much, and what your bank account reads doesn't matter as much, because there are some things that only the presence and power of God in your life can satisfy. Care how many folks follow you on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, TikTok. If you're not following him, it doesn't matter who's following you. Zacchaeus has heard about Jesus, and he's in Jericho. Jesus has come to Jericho, and Zacchaeus is aware of who he is. He's aware of what people think of him, but more than anything else, he is aware of the fact that he has messed people over. Can I tell you, brothers and sisters, folks know when they've done you wrong. When you call folks and they don't answer, and they treat you like you owe them money. See, there's this thing called contrition. It'll make you hang your head when you know you are unworthy and undeserving. It's an effect of one's conscience that it won't let you keep living the way that you're living, won't let you keep treating folks the way you've been treating folks. I do believe there will come a day where this nation will have to come to repentance and bow down at the throne of God and confess that Jesus is Lord, because you can't set up a structure of privilege and power and possessions while the people are hurting and suffering. Zacchaeus participates in this kind of climate. He recognizes how he would be rejected by the crowds, and he goes ahead of the crowd and he climbs a sycamore tree. This wide, sprawling tree with low-hanging branches that's easy to climb. Zacchaeus was short. Zacchaeus could not see over the crowd. And in order for him to get a good look at Jesus, Zacchaeus would have had to elevate himself so he could get a good look at Jesus. Y'all missed it. It was hard for Zacchaeus to see Jesus from his low position. And so in order to see Jesus, Zacchaeus needed to go a little higher. All I'm trying to suggest to some of us is that the reason why we keep living the way we live, the reason why we talk to folks the way we talk to them, The reason why we move about in the world the way that we move about is because we don't have an accurate view of Jesus, because we need God to lift us a little higher. And ought that not be our prayer when we come into the house of the Lord? Lord, take me a little higher. Lord, lift me up and let me stand by faith on heaven's tableland, no higher plane than I have found. Lord, plant my feet. I wish I had an old school church on higher ground. And so Zacchaeus goes a little higher in order to see Jesus. But what's interesting is that Jesus sees Zacchaeus before Zacchaeus sees Jesus. And if you think you can keep on living raggedy how you live, if we think we can keep on moving how we move and think that Jesus doesn't see us, we've got another thing coming, because the text shows us that not only does Jesus see Zacchaeus, but Jesus also knows him by name. Y'all gonna help me preach here. He sees Zacchaeus, but then he calls him by name. He says, Zacchaeus, righteous one, innocent one, you innocent, righteous chief tax collector, come down. How is it? Theologians argue that Jesus knew Zacchaeus by name. Is it a possible righteous act of omniscience? Because Jesus is 100% divine and 100% human, is it possible because he knows all things that he knew Zacchaeus by name? It's plausible. Or is it possible that because Zacchaeus had cheated so many people, and because Zacchaeus had all that he had on the backs of the poor, that everybody knew Zacchaeus? Long before there was a Napoleon, there was a Zacchaeus complex. Everybody knew Zacchaeus. We don't know how Jesus knew who Zacchaeus was. All we know is that Jesus knew who he was. No, brothers and sisters, that may be bad news, but the truth is it's good news. It's good news that Jesus sees and knows who we are. I take comfort in Jesus knowing and seeing Zacchaeus, because that helps me to know that no matter where I am in life's journey, that Jesus sees me, that Jesus knows me by name. He knows my mistakes. He knows my failures. He knows my shortcomings. But he also knows that without him, that I would be a lost cause and that I'm in need of his grace and his power. And he says, Zacchaeus, come down, because I'm going to your house today. There are two very significant things that happen when Jesus says this. Number one, he talks about the essentiality of going to Zacchaeus' house. He says, I must go to your house today. I must go to your house. This happens no less than 7 times throughout Luke and Acts, where Jesus uses the word must. It happens 4 times in the book of Luke alone. Jesus tells his parents as a 12-year-old boy, as he was wandering about Jerusalem, once he was found, his parents were frantic. Why did you leave? Why did you get lost? Why didn't you send word to tell us where you were? And Jesus says, did you not know that I must be about my Father's business? It talks about the seriousness and the essentiality of Jesus needing to move. There are some things that Jesus knew in his mind and in his heart that he had to do in order for the world to be saved. And I'm so glad, brothers and sisters, that when Jesus looks at you and looks at me, he has determined within himself that there are some things that I must do. I must go to Jerusalem. I must hang upon Calvary's cross. I must be raised on the 3rd day. I must pick him up. I must turn her around. I must give them a brand new start. Is there anybody here who can thank God for the mustness of Jesus? Then not only does he say, I must, but then he says, I got to go today. Jesus introduces us to what Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. called the fierce urgency of now. We got to go right now. We got to go today. Today, your life has to change. Today, you've got to turn how you've been living around. Today, you've got to make some things right today. That's why I can't stand going to funerals, hearing everybody say the same thing during the remarks. Family, you know we got to do better than this. We can't keep coming like this. And then as soon as the service is over, they go back to doing the same thing, back to arguing, back to fighting, back to acting crazy before they can even get to the cemetery. But Jesus says, no, brother, there are some things we got to rectify today. There are some things we got to change today. And I don't know who you are, brothers and sisters, but you've come to the Son's house. I've come to tell you, in case you have fallen by the wayside of life, dreams and visions shattered, you're all broken inside. Guess what? You don't have to stay in the shape that you're in. The potter wants to put you back together again, and he can do so today. You don't have to leave the same way you walked in. Your life can be changed today. Why don't you nudge somebody and tell them, wake up and do it today. Wake up and do it today. I got to run because I've already preached longer than I wanted to. Bible says Zacchaeus hurries down. And he hurries down and he's excited because Jesus wants to come to his house. Jesus wants to dine with Zacchaeus. In the Near East, to have a guest in your home meant that honor has come into your house. And how much more so for Zacchaeus to be able to host the Messiah. The one who was born as a babe in Bethlehem. The one who has enough healing to touch a leper and not contract leprosy, but to heal the leper. The one who has the power to touch blind eyes and they fly open. Zacchaeus gets to host them. And how is it that someone so low and so shady, one with such a bad reputation, gets the honor of having Jesus come into his house? I can understand the criticism, but at the same time, before I can join in the criticism, Pastor Emeritus, I got to remember what kind of house Jesus came to when I invited him into mine. I was broke, busted, and disgusted, but Jesus came into my house. I thought I had the world and the jug and the stopper in my hand, but really I had things backwards and inside out, but he came into my house. And let me not be the only one to testify. Let me testify on your behalf. When he came into your house, you were still drinking, but he came anyway. You were still smoking, but he came anyway. You were still a fornicator and adulterer, but he came anyway. You were still a liar and a cheater, but he came anyway. But is there anybody who can attest that since the day Jesus came into my house, my life has changed, my life has been renewed, nothing has been the same? And so the folks are mad. Why would he go to Zacchaeus' house? That's what the Pharisees are saying. Why would he go to Zacchaeus' house? And understand, brothers and sisters, that according to Luke, Jesus already has a history of being accused of dining with sinners. It's important for us to understand, brothers and sisters, that there was nothing more intimate than going into somebody's house and sharing what scholars call table fellowship. Eating and dining. We see Jesus eating and dining a lot. He would often at Bethany go to Mary, Martha, and Lazarus' house. And the Bible says he would recline at the table. It was the paragon of hospitality to invite someone to come into your home and to share a meal. Come on, you know that. That's why you don't let everybody come eat at your house. It's not just because they didn't put in on the groceries. And it's why you don't go to everybody else's house. It's not just because you think they keep a dirty kitchen. Sharing a meal is intimate. I love what the scholars suggest to us about this text. Not only is sharing a meal intimate, but going into one's house also meant that you shared, Lord help me here. It meant that you shared their reputation. So Jesus, who was perfect, agreed to go dine today at Zacchaeus' house. His name meant righteous or innocent one, but he was the chief tax collector. He got rich by participating in an evil system and structure that caused poor people to get poorer and rich people to get richer. He had amassed his fortunes by taking advantage of poor people. And yet the one who really is righteous and innocent decides to go and dine and have table fellowship at Zacchaeus' house. So now the one who is righteous and innocent now takes on the reputation of the tax collector. Y'all ain't shouting how I'm preaching it. Because if you really understood that when Jesus came into your house, before you put on his righteousness, he put on your unrighteousness. Before you put on his holiness, he put on your unholiness. That's why when he hung on the cross, God couldn't even look at him because he had put on your sin. And I'm so glad that Jesus took on my reputation and therefore took on my punishment so I didn't have to. Gotta go. Gotta go. But Jesus is preparing to go to Zacchaeus' house. Going to be the guest of one who was a sinner. Here's where the great change happens. Zacchaeus says to Jesus, I realize what I've done. I realize that I've participated in a government, in a system, and in a structure that promotes privilege, power, and possessions. But since I had a little talk with you, something on the inside has been working on the outside. And it says, since I had a little talk with you, half of my possessions I'll give to the poor. And if I have defrauded anybody of anything, I'll pay restitution 4 times as much as what I took. You got to understand, brothers and sisters, exactly what has happened in Zacchaeus' heart and mind. Because according to the law, Zacchaeus was only required to pay back what he took plus 20% interest. But Zacchaeus says, no, that's not good enough. Zacchaeus wants to go a little further than that. Zacchaeus says, I'm going to obey the strictest end of the law, which according to Exodus, all cattle rousers had to pay 4 times restitution of what they took. Did you hear what I said? According to Leviticus and Numbers, Zacchaeus was only required to return what he took plus 20%. But Zacchaeus says, I'll take half of my possessions, give it to the poor, and then I'll restore those whom I've defrauded 4 times what I took. Brothers and sisters, I've come to let you know that as people of the African diaspora, we can rejoice and begin to erase that blurred line between church and state, because what we find in the text is literally reparations. It is economic justice. It is the fact that the system recognizes that we have wronged the people. We have gotten rich off of free labor, and the least we can do is to restore the fortunes that we have defrauded from the people. And so Zacchaeus says, let me go as far as I can possibly go. I will restore 4 times as much. Can I say it this way? When Jesus has become Lord of your life, it ought to change the way that you live it. A change in lordship requires a change in lifestyle. All right, let me say it this way. Let me say it this way. Let me put restitution where you can get it. I went on a little date or whatever. Hey. Went on a little date, but I made just a little mistake, just a little one, nothing big, just made a little mistake. And so my date asked, how are you gonna fix this? I said, what you mean fix? I said sorry. My date said, I appreciate your apology, but to show me that you're sorry, it requires some kind of tangible demonstration. So I went to Publix. I went to the floral section. And I said, I need you to take the $10.99 sticker off, and I need you to wrap it in some tissue paper and put a bow on it. And then I went and found some Ferrero Rocher. Not the 3 count, the 12 count. And then I went and I found a little bottle of sweet perfume. And I put it in a nice little box. And I presented it and I said, here is your restitution. Because if I want you to believe that I'm sorry for my transgression, there has to be an ocular and tangible demonstration of my contrition. And all brothers and sisters, that's all I'm saying that we have to do. That we've got to wake up and assert that since we have been part of a community that has been victimized, we can't just accept empty rhetoric and promises for difference in the future. We've got to demand some ocular and tangible demonstration, because if this really is a Christian nation, then there ought to be some Christian backup to who you say that you are. All I'm trying to tell you is that when Jesus is Lord of your life, it ought to result in a change in lifestyle. And I'm done when I tell you this, but Jesus says this is why I have come. That I have come to seek and to save those that are lost. But the implication in the text is that for all of those who are lost, you have to want to be found. Zacchaeus was only able to be found because he welcomed Jesus into his house. Zacchaeus was only able to be found because he was willing to make a total life change to right the wrongs that he committed. And all brothers and sisters, you ought not be so big and so bad that you can't say sorry and demonstrate that apology. You ought not be so saved and sanctimonious that you can't say, you know what, this one's on me, but guess what, you don't have to worry about it again. When you humble yourself and realize that there are some things that only God can do in your life. It'll make you want to live different. It'll make you want to treat folks right. It'll make you want to bless people when you should really be cursing them out, because when Jesus is Lord of your life, the only result is a lifestyle change. It's all right to have stuff, but it's not all right to worship stuff. And here's the message in a sentence, and I'm done. If Jesus has come into your life ought to be completely changed. You know the problem with church? We have too many verbal Christians. I'm done. Come on, Derek. I'm done. Happy birthday, Rico. I'm done. We are Christian in our words, but we're atheists in our actions. Christianity is not about what you say. Christianity is about what you do. Telling you I'm a car and standing in my garage don't make me a car. I can only be a car if I do what cars do. You can only be a Christian if you do what Christians do. What do Christians do? Let me first tell you what Christians do not do. Christians do not do harm to other people. Christians look for a way to enlarge a circle instead of drawing a line. Christians look for ways to build bridges instead of erect walls. I pray to God that Fairfield is not a church of verbal Christians, but a people of action who demonstrate that our lives have changed because Jesus Christ makes a difference. If your Christianity is only good on Sundays between 9:30 and 11:30, you just got schizophrenia. Christianity is less about what you do in here and more about what we do out there. Who we say we are in here has to show up in a world that rejects the Christ that has come to seek and save the lost. And here's the good news of Zacchaeus' story. Come on, deacons, we're standing. The good news of Zacchaeus' story is that there is nobody so far out and so deep down that God cannot save. Here's what Zacchaeus would say if he were here. As we stand, we're standing. Zacchaeus would say that there's no mistake so great that Jesus can't change you today. I don't care who you are. I don't care what you've done, where you've been. Pastor, you don't know what kind of life I've lived. It ain't been righteous. It hasn't been innocent. But neither had Zacchaeus. But guess what? Today can be the first day of a brand new life if you invite Jesus into your house. We can't be righteous on our own. It is nothing but the blood of Jesus that has covered us, that makes us righteous. If you're here today and you want Jesus to enter into the house of your life, step out on faith today. Main floor, balcony, you're worshiping online. You want to be saved. You want Jesus to enter in. Behold, today is the day of salvation. Wake up. Make a change. Realize that Jesus already sees you where you are. He already knows you by name. If you're here, just come on today. Maybe you're saying, Pastor, I'm saved. I'm saved. But I'm looking for a church home. I'm looking for a place to connect, a place to grow in grace and in the knowledge of my Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ. If you want to connect to the Fairfield family, you want this to be your church home. I'd rather have a church home and not need one than need a church home and not have one. If you're here today, just come on. Main floor, balcony, online. Type your need. We're ready to receive you. Come on today. Come on. Come on.